All right, the next item is presentation regarding the Mcmillan Mesa land use plan and other specific plans and how they work together with the regional plan, I think.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. My name is Dan Folk. I'm the Planning Director. And we're here this evening to give you some information on Mcmillan Mesa. There's quite a history here and some things happening right now, so we thought this would be a good time to provide that information to you. Before I start, I'd just like to recognize everybody who contributed to putting this presentation together. As you can see, it really touched on several of our divisions and working groups. And a lot of this team is here this evening to assist me with questions. The goal of this evening, I outlined in your staff summary. These are the documents that I'm going to go over, and it's in the PowerPoint. But a couple of the goals that we'd like to achieve tonight is to provide information to the City Council and the public on the land use on Mcmillan Mesa. I'm going to try to distinguish between regulating documents and non-regulating documents, so kind of piggybacking on a little bit of what Michelle was just talking about. And then finally, just an overview of some of the applications that are in process right now that staff is looking at. So first we'll start with the planning triangle. Hopefully you've seen this before. It is in our regional plan. It's also in our zoning code, slightly different version. But this is just a good place to begin. There's a lot of terms that are used that I think are very confusing. And so we kind of have this hierarchy. On top is the regional plan. And that really is the vision of the community. So it's got goals, policies, implementation strategies. You'll also hear it referred to as the general plan. That's how it's described in state statute. So our general plan is our regional plan, the Flagstaff Regional Plan 2030. And again, everything should kind of follow from the regional plan. It does have some role in making decisions on land use. For example, with a rezoning, there's a finding required that the project or the rezoning request is consistent with the regional plan. But it primarily is a visionary document. And then as you work your way down, you can develop specific plans that should build on your regional plan. Examples of this are the La Plaza Vieja neighborhood plan that we're working on right now. You're going to see that it has goals and policies that are specific to that neighborhood and the vision for that neighborhood. But again, everything that's in there should be consistent with the regional plan as well. Other examples are your parks and recreation plan, an open space plan, the regional transportation plan, which is adopted by the FMPO, thank you, the Flagstaff Metropolitan Planning Organization. And so that's another example of a specific plan. This evening there's a few specific plans that have different names that I'm going to review, and and you'll see that they are primarily visionary as well. We prefer for the regulatory function to be in that bottom level, the implementation. And so that's where you have your zoning code, your capital improvement program, which again would be implementing the priorities you identify in your regional plan and in your regional transportation plan. Housing plans, your engineering standards and all the development standards, those are all implementation codes, and so those are definitely regulatory. So I'm going to go over an overview of some of the documents and planning studies and such that have gone on Mcmillan Mesa. And so these three that are listed here are really specific to Mcmillan Mesa. They're not things that address the community as a whole, like the regional plan. In 1992, there was a privately initiated specific plan. It's called the Mcmillan Mesa Specific Plan. And its function really turned into a regulating document. So the product of that specific plan was an ordinance that rezoned the property. And in that ordinance, if you've read it, there's some very specific details, not only how the property was rezoned, but it has stipulations on street improvements, sidewalks, foot trails. There's notes on land uses that are not appropriate. There's some notes on height. And so in that regard, because it was adopted by ordinance, those are very regulatory. Those do apply to the property rights up on that property that was included in that specific plan. So that one's kind of a hybrid. Typically, we would say that this is more of a visionary plan, but in that case, it is very regulatory. In 2002, there was a master plan done. This was initiated, I believe, by the city. It outlined 4 different options, and it looked at really all of McMillan Mesa, from Buffalo Park all the way south of what we're going to look at today. It covered quite a large area. And again, it had 4 options. My understanding is that the council decided to go forward with potentially the conservation option and put a question on the ballot. I'm told this is maybe what kind of was the precursor to that decision, which was to purchase those private development rights that exist up there. My understanding is that initiative failed. From then we went into 2003, where we actually created an open space committee, which I think is a significant player in what's happened up on the Mesa. In 2007, there was another study done. It's called a concept plan, and this was it was called the concept plan for publicly owned property. And to my right are some of the exhibits that came out of that process. Again, this was a visionary document. It was endorsed by council, meaning they endorsed it at a work session. There was not a vote. It was not adopted by ordinance or resolution. And again, it's more of a non-regulatory document. And I'm going to get into more detail on the specific plan and the concept plan. But I believe all 3 of these fall into that middle section of our pyramid. Again, I mentioned 2003. That's when the city created an open space commission. Several of the regulating documents that apply to the entire city that I'm going to go over tonight are obviously the zoning code and the Flagstaff regional plan, which talks about area types and goals and policies. So the zoning code is obviously that bottom layer. That's our implementation phase. And then, of course, the regional plan, which is our top of the pyramid. So just an overview. Here's an aerial photograph. I just want to orient everybody where we are. This evening, I'm really going to focus on things south of Forest and Cedar. Obviously, McMillan Mesa, there's a north half and a south half. Starting on the north, you've got the USGS. Over here is the J. Lively Recreation Center. This is Gemini Road here. You've got Coconino High School, the Sunnyside neighborhood. To the east, this is an APS substation. This is the cinder pile, which is kind of a landmark as people drive up there. You know where that is. Again, here's Gemini. Moving to the south, you've got the Catholic Church to the south. Some residential here that I've seen referred to as the Horseshoe in several documents. This is Turquoise. This is, I believe it's Pine Cliff, if I have it correctly. And then again, Gemini. This is the basis school right here. Some of the characteristics, just to give you a little overview. Now again, this is focusing on just property south of Forest and Cedar, so it's not really it's not everything we consider to be McMillan Mesa. But just in general, these numbers are estimates based on some GIS mapping. There's approximately 103 acres of private land, about 263 acres of public land, which is, I think, all city-owned land. And then that APS substation is almost 1.5 acres. In terms of zoning, this again encompasses all the land south of Forest and Cedar. We've got about 212 acres of residential zoning, and that's a mix of zoning from rural residential to high-density residential. About 89 acres of public facilities, 59 acres of research and development, and about 9 acres of commercial. Here's a map that really does a good job of showing you the different ownership. The dark kind of purple is all of the publicly owned land, which is again city land. This black border was the boundary of the 2007 concept plan for public property, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the blue outline is the property that was subject to the 1992 specific plan. All of this unshaded area is what's privately owned. So again, the city owns a parcel here, it connects up to forest. This is right out of our regional plan. This is the future growth illustration. And so it identifies area types. And the idea of area types is it's not zoning, it doesn't entitle a property, but again, it portrays our vision for use of that property, and it helps inform your decisions on rezoning requests. The solid colors are existing area types, and so the predominant one in this section is yellow, which is suburban. Our area types are urban, suburban, rural, and employment area type. And so you've got a lot of yellow, suburban. Where it's crosshatched, that represents future area type, and this blue crosshatch is the employment area type. You can see you've got some areas that overlap. You've got yellow underlined with a blue on top, and so that would, again, guide a determination if an application came forward to rezone. You could consider that future area type or the existing. You'll notice quite a large part of the city-owned property is in white. And if you go to the key, what it says is existing entitlements remain. And so my understanding is during the discussion on the regional plan and what to do with some of the city-owned land, there was a decision made not to assign it to a specific area type. All of the entitlements are retained with this area type map, not just the white areas. But really what it means is if somebody were to come in and want to rezone a property that was in white, they would have to do a plan amendment at the same time to get it into an area type. There is one piece of privately owned land, having trouble with the mouse here, that is in white. Again, this is, the city owns this and on up through here. Here's the zoning map, and you can see there's a number of districts here. I'll just go through some of them. The city-owned parcels are primarily RR, which is rural residential. It's a very low-density residential district. PF, up on the, just below Cedar, up on the northern part, is public facilities. You see RD in a lot of the privately owned land. That's research and development. So it's office uses, business park, that type of kind of lower intensity, light industrial type uses. You've got some public facilities to the south. This is suburban commercial, which is one of the few commercially zoned districts up there on the mesa. There's a little piece over here as well. Right here you've got high density residential and then medium density residential. This isn't specifically about the Veterans Home proposal, but I did want to give you just a little recap of what I just went through and how it would be applied. Looking back, my understanding is what's being considered for the Veterans Home is right up in here. It would basically go to the east of Gemini. I should have shown on an aerial, there's a foots trail that goes through here, and I guess it's actually part of the Arizona Trail. That would obviously remain where it is, and I believe it goes up to just south of the APS substation and back to where the grade really begins to slope upward. And so that is in the white. It's an undesignated area type. It is currently zoned rural residential. We believe the use that most closely resembles the proposed home would require a conditional use permit. However, if the state is an applicant, that would be your decision, I think. They wouldn't have to follow our zoning ordinance. They don't need to comply with our zoning regulations. But I believe you would have the ability to put a stipulation or a deed restriction if you were to gift that land. That's my understanding. Now I'm going to start talking about the specific plan, which was adopted in 1992. Again, there was a plan put together, and then there was an ordinance that actually rezoned property. It was about 146 acres. Some of that has since been deeded to the city, so that's why the amount of privately owned land up there is now less. It's closer to 100 acres. It did include some very specific stipulations, if you've read through that, again on sidewalks, foots trails, height on certain parcels, and then it even included infrastructure phasing, and there's actually cross sections of the roads, so there's a lot of detail in in that ordinance and that plan. These are the different areas identified in the plan. If you have the ordinance, it refers to these parcels A through J. Now we've given you a handout. It's actually right from the ordinance, and so this helps with this. It's the map on the left. And it relates to this table, which is really an overview of all the action that was taken. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I do have some summaries. It rezoned approximately 46 acres into residential land use, about 9 acres, 9.5 acres into commercial, 65 acres into business park, which is now our research and development district, and about 26 acres were set aside for a school. And there are some notes in here with some of the stipulations in terms of some of the uses and development regs. In terms of what's been built on the Mesa since the '92 plan, I think most folks are aware of this. Obviously, the basis school was built on Track D. There's a Senior Meadows, which is a, I believe, housing for seniors on Tract H. The Guardian Ambulance Facility is currently under construction. That's up on the west side of Gemini. And then there's been several residential projects, I believe primarily single-family homes that have been built. In terms of what's currently under review, we have 2 projects that are in site plan review. And so this is our administrative staff review where we review it to make sure it's compliant with all of our engineering standards, all of our zoning standards. Once site plan review is complete and they have approval, they can then pursue building permits. There's proposed housing development, 23 rental units proposed on tract, I believe it's IA. This is the site plan that we're looking at right now. This is Pine Cliff right here, going south, little cul-de-sac. This would be access into the property. This is access aisles and parking. These are the actual units. Again, it's 23 units. We're being told they're going to be rental units. They're cottage style. The architectural elevations are really, we think, very good and appropriate. We like the style of them. Staff worked quite a while with the developer to get a site plan that worked for us, and we believe this will be a good contribution to our housing market. A second one that's under review is a administrative office building for Flagstaff Medical Center. It's about a 78,000 square foot building, 2 stories. This is directly south of the Guardian Ambulance Facility that's being built right now. This is Gemini coming south. There's a road that's going to come in back here to give access. This is where the office building's proposed with parking all around and again, access from the rear. The building faces Gemini, just like Guardian Ambulance. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the 2007 concept plan for public properties. So this was a process that Carl Eberhard led, working with our Open Space Commission and the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Mr. Falk, before you move into that, would you go back just a second? You have the two development projects that are under current review.
Yes.
Do either of those require a change of zoning?
They do not. Okay. So it's an administrative site plan review. So just to orient you, north is now to the left. So this is coming up Forest and around. Over here is the accelerator building. I forgot to mention that's under construction. So here's where you'd come into Gemini. The red boundary was the boundary of the concept plan work that was done. Some of the design goals that they were looking for was low impact recreation uses. They identified that as least built, using native landscaping, no lighting to minimal lighting, obviously restoring the cinder pile area. One of the ideas was to actually accommodate larger events that happen in Wheeler Park, kind of as an overflow event area, obviously trail connections to the surrounding neighborhoods and the foot system. And there were 3 areas identified. I'm just going to go through these, and I've got these boards over here, so the public should feel welcome to come over and take a closer look if you'd like. Coming off of Gemini, what was proposed was a linear event area, and so it was parking all along Gemini and then actual event area. So Carl was telling me an example would be like a car show, some kind of a craft fair, something. You could set up vendors along the parking with a fence on the other side. So a real delineation from the open space area and kind of the event area. This is the APS compound here, the high school up here. There was a north end, which talked about some outdoor recreation activities and a trailhead. And then finally the west end, north of what we call the horseshoe. There was an idea of like an interpretive center. This might actually have some buildings on it, a restroom. Not so passive, but again, some more, perhaps some actual improvements built on the property. And so again, this was done with the cooperation and the help of the Open Space Commission and the Parks and Recreation Commission. They did approve the final plan. There is no actual document. It really was the development of this site plan. My understanding, the City Council did endorse the plan at a work session. And then the last time it kind of came before Council was in 2013 when you were doing a property inventory, and there was a decision at that time to leave it undesignated. So that kind of is consistent with the white area type. And that's all I have for you this evening. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Ms. Barrett.
So I don't have a question. I do want to say thank you very much for preparing all of that information. I was an advocate of having a presentation that included an overview of the Mesa so that we could put everything into context instead of making decisions on a just case-by-case basis without seeing the big picture. My other comment is that you mentioned this notion of somehow memorializing, whether it be a deed restriction or in some other way, with regard to the veterans' home, a requirement that the state abide by our zoning ordinance and building codes, et cetera. And I'm just throwing out the idea that the resolution that we're going to consider next week, I wonder if we might include some language in there that at least refers to what we're thinking, so it doesn't come as a surprise later, that we document the idea of a deed restriction now, even though it doesn't have any legal effect in this, it's just helping to pave the way. So that's it, thanks.
All right.
Mr. Folk, would it be a fair statement to say that there is nothing that precludes a veteran's home from being in the property that we have kind of conditionally identified? But it is not, as you had pointed out earlier, it would require, for anybody, it would require a conditional use permit to operate such a facility in that location.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So what it says about conditional use permits is the code actually says they're permitted uses, but that they require a close look to see if there's impacts that need to be mitigated. So it kind of recognizes that those uses in that district might have impacts such as traffic, lighting, noise, things that might not be consistent with everything in that district. And so it gives the opportunity for the Planning Commission to put conditions to limit things like lighting, maybe hours of operation if it was a retail store, things like that. But they are listed as a permitted use in the district, CUP's, conditional use permits.
Ms. Brewster?
Well, it looks like it's a lot of mixed-use area, which I think is a good idea. But I was wondering I understand that these are just concept plans. Are any of them gone forward as far as in your department? Is there anything actually, I know the Innovation Mesa is almost done, but right. On the other stuff, is there anything very far along, or is it just all pretty much on that you just gave us on.
Yeah, the only actual
Like-
applications we have are the 2 site plan applications. There was a neighborhood meeting for a rezoning, potential rezoning that we've not received yet, so we don't actually have an application, but there was a neighborhood meeting, I believe Miramonte Homes held it about a month ago, maybe. But again, we don't have an application on that, and until we actually have something submitted, it's very difficult to speculate on what
Right,
they ultimately
right.
will ask for.
Yeah, that's what I just wondered,
Yeah.
if anybody was very far along at all, so, yeah.
That project has been, they've had meetings with staff, and they had their neighborhood meeting, a preliminary one, which we recommended, but nothing's been submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Evans, I can't see you, so if you need to chime in, don't hesitate.
I was waiting to see if you could remember I was here. Thank you, Mayor.
Hey.
I just wanted to say thank you to the staff. I really appreciate it. I think Celia's right to have an overview of the Mesa and everything that's happening there and what the zoning is and is not and who owns what was extremely valuable. I think there's a lot of fear in the community as to what this veterans home is going to look like. I think that when we do the resolution, we can articulate in the resolution what Flagstaff values are. But there's also a process which unfortunately does not allow the state of Arizona Veterans Department to produce a rendering of what this is going to look like prior to them actually having the funding to move ahead with it. I also think that, I know that I've spoken several times with several people down in Phoenix about the fact that we staff value our open space, our dark skies, our view sheds, and I get assurances that they understand that. And they want that veterans home on Mcmillan Mesa to be as beautiful as possible. So I just want to, I guess, everybody in the community, that I think that the VA, I think they understand. And unfortunately, their hands are tied because of how the process moves forward. But I do think that they understand that we want something that's going to be reflective of the Flagstaff values that we have.
Mr. Horvitz?
I think we've seen the pictures before, but do we have any of the Yuma VA home, a rendition or any pictures? So can we get those?
I've
Just
not
because
seen it,
I think I've seen them before, and they were
David might know.
very well done, and that may put, as to what Councilwoman Evans was saying, may put some, make it more comfortable.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Orovitz, David McIntyre, Assistant to the City Manager for Real Estate and Interim Community Investment Director. In the presentation that you're going to see in a couple items from now, there are pictures of the Tucson facility, which will provide some visuals of a currently operating facility. Yuma does not have their funding either, and thus there are no renditions or